The VCSE Barometer survey. The sector's regular temperature check. Informed by VCSE organisations for VCSE organisations nationwide. Unlock insights for impact.
Morning and welcome to this is the presentation from the 9th wave of the barometer. For those of you that I haven't met, my name's Daniel King. Can we move on to the next slide? So yeah, just first of all, just to say thank you so much everybody for taking part in the barometer. So this is our 9th wave, so we're really pleased for people who've either this is the first time you've been on part of the barometer or that you've participated in every wave, and we really sort of value the insights and the connections there. And fundamentally the aim of this is to collect information and real-time insights about what's happening in the voluntary community social enterprise sector, and to try to collect those insights and to bring them together to shape information for policymakers, for practitioners, and also for the organisations who participate in the barometer as well, to give real-time insights to what's happening in the sector right now. This we regularly see as sort of the temperature check of the sector. We launched this as a quarterly barometer in November 2022, having run similar projects during COVID as well, and we develop up the question sets alongside 14 national organisations, but we're also very open and listening to lots of different people's views as well about what we want to include in this wave. We're talking today about wave 9, which occurred between the 22nd of January and the 12th of February this year and had 665 participants, which is good news. One of the things that you may be seeing as well is that we've now got these insight reports. This is individual reports that are sent out to people who've chosen to. So one of the things that people were regularly saying to us when they completed the barometer is that they would like to get a sense of how others are doing and how do they compare with others. So this is our sort of first attempt at that. This is an example that we've just put up where you can compare your response to those of the wider sector. You'll see on this particular example, the bit that's highlighted in pink is the individual response. We produce them both as a PDF, so that's something you can download, but also an HTML, like a web page. And the idea of this is you can see, you can actually take a snapshot. There's a little camera icon on this, and you can connect into that and then be able to upload those as images that you can see as well. So we hope this is useful. We're getting some feedback from people. We know this is a very much a beginning approach to this and something that we hope will get better as things go along. So this is our first attempt to this, and so that's something that we're introducing, and we're very keen to see how that might work and using that. I see in the chat a few people having problems seeing the presentation. Hopefully that can be resolved. So we will be recording this, so you should be able to see it later if you can't. And let's move on to the next slide. We've also got our interactive dashboard. There's a link there. If somebody in the team doesn't mind just putting a link in the chat as well, you can see the link on the slide, so you should be able to click onto that and get a sense of that. The idea of this is that you can drill down a little bit by organisation size and type and location as well, so you get a little bit more out of this. And if we can move on to the next slide. And we've got our report as well, which we've come up with a new sort of template and strategy. Really keen as well as part of this discussion to see what people think about this. You'll see that we've got new branding, but we've also tried to make it a lot quicker and easier to read than maybe the versions that you've seen before. So it's a lot fewer words in this report than maybe the previous ones. So we're designing them to be quick and easy to read. So yeah, very keen to see your views on that as well. And yeah, then we'll just put the link in the chat for that. Just a quick few headlines, and I'm going to pass over to my colleague Ben, who will talk you through this. This wave 9, though, was really looking at a set of issues that we know were impacting the sector and trying to understand what was happening. So we're really interested in the impacts of national insurance contribution, the rises in the national living wage, and also the issues of contracts that we were hearing a lot of concerns about. But also just trying to get that wider picture of what was happening in the sector. So we're sort of seeing the triple impact of rising costs, rising demand, and additional pressures as well. We thought that was quite a nice quote, highlighting some of the challenges that people are saying. We found that 2 in 5 organisations have reported a deteriorating financial position over the last 3 months. 2 in 3 are saying as well, reporting an increase in service demand. So we've got a situation of deteriorating finances and increasing service demand. 2 in 5 organisations expecting their financial position to deteriorate as well. So that's definitely the highest we've seen since February 2023. So that's wave 2. And 2 in 5 organisations expected to fall short of meeting the demand that they face as well. And obviously for voluntary organisations, that's a key aim, is actually to achieve their mission, is can they meet the demand that's placed on them. So that shows quite a challenging landscape. It'd be interesting to see what you're facing. We ask every wave, what are the top 3 concerns? And income is very much up there by quite a long way now against other sort of concerns. As nearly 3/4 of organisations, or just over that, actually 511 organisations reporting that is a major concern, as well as increasing demand and volunteering recruitment as well, which we've reported on previously over time, have been major concerns, and we've seen these quite consistently. But I think that income one is quite starkly high for a very large percentage of organisations as well, having that as their key challenge. Move on to the next slide. And then we've seen 2 in 3 organisations reporting an increase in service demand over the last 3 months, and 3 in 4 expecting that to continue as well. So we've seen a lot of organisations saying it's increased either a little or nearly a quarter saying actually it's increased a lot. And 72% of organisations expecting service demand to increase in the next 3 months as well, with only 1% expecting that to decrease. So quite a challenging landscape, I think it'd be fair to say as well. Next slide. And half of organisations expected to meet the demand with limited or spare capacity, and 2 in 5, so just short of half, are expecting to fall short as well. So I think, again, very few organisations, only just under 70%, so 7% are saying that they've got spare capacity. So half of organisations are saying yes, but with very limited capacity. So a rather tight landscape that organisations are facing as well. And 2 in 5, and I think then I'll hand over to you, Ben. 2 in 5 are saying that they've a deteriorating financial position over the last 3 months as well. Ben, did you want to say a little bit more about this and then take on the next part?
Yeah, thanks. So as Daniel said, 2 in 5 reported a deterioration in their financial position over the past 3 months, and this is an increase of more than 7% from wave 8, and it's one of the highest that we've seen since February 2023. So a similar proportion also expect their financial position to deteriorate over the next 3 months, which is an increase of 6% from the last wave that we did, and is also the highest proportion that we've seen since February 2023. So organisations are consistently reporting an increasingly challenging financial position in wave 9, even though around a third report it unchanged over the past 3 months. It's usually more of a balanced picture, so we usually have similar amounts, but this time we're seeing 2 in 5 saying that it deteriorated. So 2 in 3 organisations said that their financial position has deteriorated due to rising costs. So when we split this by organisation size, we can see that 81% of large organisations report deterioration, a 22% increase since wave 8, and a similar proportion of medium organisations, around 3/4, report deterioration due to rising costs, while just over half of small organisations report this. But this is a 10% decrease, actually, for small organisations from wave 8. So in response to rising costs, we can see organisations taking a number of steps there. Around half report unexpected use of reserves to cope with rising costs, which is around an increase of 7% from wave 8. Around 40% have had to increase service prices, which we'll dig into a little bit later on when we explore the topical question set. And we found that nearly half are using financial reserves to cover general operating costs. So most organisations report no substantial change in the number of paid staff and volunteers over the past 3 months. So well over half saying that the number of paid staff and volunteers stayed the same, 63% for paid staff, 58% for volunteers. The only real notable changes here is that 6% fewer organisations report an increase in paid staff numbers, and 3% more organisations say that paid staff numbers have decreased a little. So that's maybe reflective of upcoming planning to do with the policy changes. This view of no major changes pretty similar for the next 3 months as well. Although interestingly, 26% of organisations expect increases in paid staff numbers over the next 3 months, which is slightly higher than wave 8, and we didn't really expect that because of upcoming policy changes. However, 16% do expect a decrease in staff numbers, which is 5% higher than wave 8, so there's a bit more polarisation there. Almost identical to wave 8, 63% of organisations expect volunteer numbers to stay the same over the next 3 months, and around 1 in 3 expect slight increases, and 6% expect decreases in volunteer numbers. So a bit more confidence there around volunteer numbers over the next 3 months. So while the majority of organisations, 63%, are not experiencing recruitment difficulties, we still have 37% that are reporting ongoing recruitment challenges. There's not a huge amount of difference by organisation size here. Slightly more organisations, small organisations, report recruitment difficulties than medium and large organisations. Among those experiencing recruitment difficulties, there are a number of reported consequences, as you can see there. Top of the list is employees having to work increased hours. Organisations are also saying that they're unable to meet demand as a result of recruitment difficulties, or they're also having to pause some operations. Again, we had quite a few respondents take the opportunity to put some open text in the other category there. And this was around the strain on volunteers, existing volunteers. So because of the issues with paid staff challenges and obviously issues with recruitment of volunteers, the burden is being shouldered often by existing volunteers there. There's just a little quote at the bottom. We can't afford more paid staff and are struggling to find volunteers to ease the workload of existing volunteers. So that kind of nicely summarises the situation. So Daniel, I don't know if you want to just kind of recap what we were looking at in the topical questions for wave 9.
So the thing that we were looking at in this report then was the impact of a variety of different things coming from the budget in the autumn, and then some other things around contracts as well. So as you'll know, national insurance contributions have risen for employers, and then there's also the national living wage. Some people call it the minimum wage. Both of those were raised in the budget, and we've seen some issues and concerns people had about the impact that was having, particularly on large organisations. So we'll dig into that a little bit. And the other thing that we were looking at in particular in this report were the issues that many people were saying getting towards the end of a financial year, and people being concerned about renewal of contracts as well, particularly public sector contracts and things. So these are some of the things that we wanted to focus on in the report. So you can see then we've just put together the key findings, and then Ben can go through some of the things there. Half of the organisations that responded to the survey expected a negative impact from rises in the national insurance and the national living wage. 1 in 4 organisations expected to make staffing and overheads reductions, sort of issues around redundancies and increasing reliance on volunteers as well. So it'd be interesting to see in terms of your organisations any impacts of that. 1 in 5 organisations expected to make changes in how they deliver their services, potentially about raising some of the issues around prices or reducing the number of free services as a way of compensating for this. And 3 in 4 organisations saying that government contracts and services do not now cover the cost of delivering those services as well. This has been something that I think a lot of organisations have been worried about, effectively subsidising government grants and contracts, but that's really saying now that's becoming, a major part for organisations. So we wanted to dig into that, and Ben, if you go through that, and be interested in terms of the discussion, see what people think of this.
Yeah, sure. So one of the first kind of things that we wanted to do was to ask organisations about the current financial and operational state. And we found that most organisations, 56%, as you can see there, say they're in a state of managing. So they're stable and managing current pressures, but with concerns about the future. So while only 5% of organisations fall into the at-risk category, where viability is at risk or at risk of imminent closure, over 1/4 describe themselves as vulnerable and uncertain about their organisation's future. So in this chart here, we showed the level of financial risk posed to organisations by different funding streams. So you can see there on the left-hand side, we've got the different funding streams. In the pink is high risk, in the purple is moderate risk, and in the green is low or no risk. So when asked about this, around 3/4 of organisations rated grants from government and from trusts and foundations as moderate to high risk. Not dissimilar in risk is service delivery contracts, which 2/3 of organisations say is either high or moderate risk. Slightly more mixed is public donations and trading activity, which is more balanced in risk, while over 3/4 of organisations say that investment income is either low or no risk to their financial position. And when asked if these funding sources would cover rising costs and the costs of delivering services, around 3/4 said it was uncertain or unlikely that income from government grants and service delivery contracts would cover these costs. So 79% said that it was uncertain or unlikely that income from government grants would cover these costs. So there's been much discussion about the potential impact of upcoming policy changes on the financial and operational position of organisations, and the estimated cost ranges between £8,000 and £6 million per organisation, depending on their size, so it varies quite widely. So when we asked about the expected impact of policy changes on organisations' financial positions over the next 12 months, we found that over half of organisations think that rises in employer national insurance contributions will have a negative impact, with slightly fewer than half expecting the national living wage to have a negative impact. And while many organisations maintain a neutral position, very few expect any positive outcomes from these changes. So actually, when we dig a bit deeper into that data, we can see that the impact of national insurance contributions and the national living wage rises on the financial position of organisations isn't balanced between organisation sizes, which is, to be expected. The larger the organisation, the larger the workforce, and therefore more susceptible to these changes. So while smaller organisations employ over half of the sector's paid workforce, only around 1/4 anticipate negative impacts from these policy changes. In contrast, larger organisations, which obviously have substantially bigger workforces, expect a much greater impact. So 98% of large organizations and 74% of medium organizations expect that the rise in national insurance contributions will have a negative impact on their financial position. This drops slightly for the national living wage, 75% of large organizations and 57% of medium organizations. And we've seen that these effects are already being felt across the sector, with several large voluntary organizations taking steps such as redundancies to shore up their financial position. So when asking organizations how prepared they were to absorb the costs associated with these policy changes, just under half of organizations reported being mostly or fully prepared, while 1 in 3 reported being somewhat prepared, and just under 1 in 5 said they were not prepared at all. So these results suggest that there's quite a divide in the sector in terms of their preparedness to absorb these costs. So despite reporting a lesser impact, small organizations show marked polarization in their preparedness to absorb the costs associated with these policy changes. So around a quarter of small organizations fall at either end of the spectrum of being fully prepared to being completely unprepared. So while most large organizations expect these policy changes to have a negative impact, actually only 1 in 8, 13%, reported feeling completely unprepared to absorb the costs associated with these changes. And so we think that this divide could suggest that some small organizations might lack the size and the scope and the flexibility of larger organizations to absorb these increased costs. So that could potentially make them more vulnerable despite reporting a lesser overall impact. So this is a bit of a messy one, so bear with me. So in response to policy changes, over 1/4 of organizations, 27% in our entire sample, nearly all of which have a paid workforce, plan to make adjustments to staffing and overheads in the upcoming year. So of that 20%, 27%, over half of those organizations expect to increase staff redundancies while cutting hours and recruitment efforts as well. And despite ongoing challenges in volunteer recruitment and retention, over 2/3, 68%, expect to increase their reliance on volunteers to mitigate these challenges, these changes in staffing. So actually in Wave 7, around 6 months ago, we asked a similar question where we asked, in responses to challenges in recruitment and retention of paid staff, what are kind of the actions that you're taking? And under a quarter, 23% of organizations said they plan to increase the reliance on volunteers. So this figure, 68%, this is almost 3 times as high as then. Although the question is slightly different, it gives us an indication that these policy changes are maybe having a bigger impact than initially thought. So organizations also expect to scale back on operational spending, cutting non-essential purchases, reducing investment in equipment and technology, and decreasing the use of outsourced services. So over 1 in 5, 22% of organizations, again, the majority with a paid workforce, plan to adapt their service delivery model due to policy changes. So of those organizations, 42% expect to reduce the overall number of services, whilst also cutting free services and limiting access to certain services, whilst raising prices for services that remain. So you can see there's quite a common theme in terms of reducing services and increasing service prices. We can also see that around half are pursuing partnerships and collaborations, maybe to address capacity issues and maintain service demand despite rising costs and increasing demand. So yeah, these adaptations suggest quite a significant reshaping of service models that could impact both the accessibility and affordability of essential services for service users. So we asked all organisations what the expected impact of these policy changes will be on various service areas. So price of services, availability of services, and you can see the rest of them down the left-hand side there. And so with this kind of financial uncertainty, fewer staff available, and a growing reliance on volunteers when resources are already stretched. It's not really a surprise to see that over a quarter of organisations expect the price, availability, accessibility, and number of their services to worsen over the next year. We can see that price is kind of the most affected, with 1 in 3, over 1 in 3, saying that will worsen over the next year. So this is just an overview of kind of the key findings of what's going on. So as we said at the start, kind of 1 in 4 report being vulnerable, even though most organisations report being stable, they do have concerns about the future. We can see that, you know, the impact isn't balanced. Large organisations and medium organisations report the biggest impact from this. And some operational adjustments, such as increasing volunteer reliance at a time when, you know, we're hearing that the recruitment and the retention of volunteers is already at, you know, quite a difficult point. And the service model changes, increasing fees, reducing free services, potential implications that this might have on service users, and the wider implications. You can also see that the impact on service users there, so service price worsening again, availability, quantity of services worsening over the next 12 months. And the sector-wide implications, adding to existing challenges that voluntary organisations are already facing. And even though we found that, you know, the figure 1/4 of organisations are expecting to make these changes, many of these are, you know, large and medium organisations that are serving most likely more service users. And if there is, those service users have to go elsewhere, well, this shift demand to smaller organisations, and, you know, we're not sure what the implications of this will be yet.
So we've got a question for you. We want to open this up in a second for conversation. So I'd be really interested to know sort of what impact you expect the upcoming policy changes will have on your organisation or those organisations you work with. We know for large organisations it's probably more significant than smaller organisations, but maybe, as Ben says, there might be some secondary implications as well, or anything else that you think coming out of the report and what we've said. We'll open that up to a discussion in a moment. Go on to the next slide. So just to give you a bit of a sense check about our direction as well. I mean, our fundamental aim is to make what we're doing as useful and as beneficial and as empowering as possible. So we've launched, as I said earlier, these individualised reports. More than happy to have feedback on that. We've produced a new sort of style for the reports as well. We hope that they become more readable and usable. So be very interested to know what you think of those as well. We are developing up our dashboard, bringing together trends and giving a more holistic view of the sector as well. The next wave is going to happen in April and May. So just to let you know that it will be coming up, and anything, you know, again, we're always open to thoughts and ideas as sort of topic areas, etc. as well. And then the final slide just has our contact details and things on, so how to be in touch with us. I think primarily probably the best thing would be our email address. We are developing up a website. We've got LinkedIn. We sort of lurk on X, but as many people are probably thinking about other places to engage with people from a social media point of view.
See where you are in the big picture. Stay ahead of the curve. Join a community of changemakers. Amplify your voice. Drive collaboration and innovation. Sign up for the survey. Have your say. And influence action where it counts. For you. Your input matters.